What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube, and today I've got another edition of The Drive-In, where I watch recently released films and tell you guys whether they're worth watching, worth waiting for, or worth skipping altogether. Today I'm talking about another of the 2022 horror releases. There's been a lot this year, and I'm talking about one that I wasn't initially too fond of, based on the early trailers. One that I was like, this is hit or miss. Should I see this? Is this going to be the kind of film that's worth seeing in theaters? And people online told me, spoiler-free, go see it. So now I'm bringing you guys my spoiler-free review of 2022's Barbarian. Again, this was one that I was like, I could take or leave it. I might skip this. We'll see. I'll see it later. But I was told to go see this in the theaters, and I wound up going with a good buddy of mine, Michael Barnett, local actor. You guys have seen him on this channel several times in my scenes. Michael and Alex, two wonderful guys, great friends, good people. We went to see this movie together, and I've got a lot of things to say about it, so let's talk about it. This movie is written and directed by Zach Krieger, who I had not really heard of. I think he's directed one or two things previously. Mostly it looked like TV series to me. I had not seen a lot of films under Zach Krieger's writing credit or directing credit, but he made a splash in this one. This movie stars Georgina Campbell as Tess, Bill Skarsgård as Keith, and Justin Long as AJ. And the spoiler-free kind of synopsis of this, as the trailer indicates, is that Georgina Campbell's character Tess, she goes to stay at an Airbnb for something in town, and it winds up being double booked. So she's staying at this Airbnb with somebody else who's another guest at this Airbnb, as the landlord has booked it for two of them. And we come to find out that connected to this house, underground, there are a lot of things crazy that are happening. So this house has another life of its own under it, and that is all I'll say for the spoiler-free portion of the synopsis. Again, this movie, I didn't really know what to expect. You kind of get a vibe from the trailer, and it really subverts the expectations. The entire time, we're seeing mostly two characters in the first part of this film, and that is Georgina Campbell as Tess and Bill Skarsgård as Keith. Now, obviously, some of these people were names. Georgina Campbell, to me, could easily wind up being another face of horror, another one of those final girl kind of fighter characters. I like the way she was written. Bill Skarsgård, obviously, underrated performance here as Keith, and Justin Long later on as AJ. Obviously, we know what Justin Long can do from Jeepers Creepers and all the other stuff that he's done over the years. I thought the acting was a strong point in this film, and I thought the chemistry between Bill Skarsgård and Georgina Campbell was nice, as it was essentially a two-person play, so to speak, for the first half of this film. Right away, two things that stood out to me: sets and shots. So obviously when you're doing something with an Airbnb, isolated house, quiet, kind of beat down neighborhood, the neighborhood's not the greatest, so you get a lot of like background houses, people kind of wandering around like zombies almost. You get a dilapidated town with this one Airbnb standing out. And the characters are centrally in this house for, better than half the film, if not more. So you want the location to feel eerie and creepy and creaky and all that stuff. And they did a good job with that in the sets and the shots. The sets were well built. Everything was really nicely kind of showcased. And the shots were really cool in general as well. Lots of dark hallways, lots of round corners, lots of long shots. I like stuff like that. When you give me a location with good hallways, that's going to stand out. You have some shots early on in this film that really kind of remind me of The Descent. You have this kind of, you've seen in the trailers, kind of this cave, really archaic, dark, spooky kind of flashlit kind of basement area, and it reminds me of The Descent a little bit, where it's kind of the tension is built on the sound design and the quietness whenever they quiet their tone. And you're kind of waiting for, something's going to jump out. You don't know when. You're getting a lot of long hallway shots, which I love. You're getting a lot of just dark and dampness, and you're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. Where early on, this reminds me of The Descent. Later on, it kind of devolves, and again, this is not a spoiler, but it kind of reminds me of some of those classic family caveman kind of things where you get The Hills Have Eyes and Wrong Turn, and, just stuff like that, movies like that. Kind of early Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You get these kind of caveman, kind of hunter vibes from the film. Something else I really enjoyed, if I could read my writing, antagonist. The antagonist in this film, I won't say whom or what it is, but they are layered. They give the antagonist a reason for being what they are, and they give the antagonist some heart. The antagonist is not just some cold-blooded killer. It's not just some mindless butcher. You have slasher kind of elements to this, but there are reasons and layers for it. I kind of like the duality of this antagonist, even though we don't see a ton of it. I think the antagonist is protected in this film, but when you do see the antagonist, you get kind of a reason for why they're there, and you get some pretty good effects. Again, the next positive in this for me is mostly practical effects. A couple times they do kind of go the CGI route, but it's kept brief. So when the CGI is there, it might look a little silly. You don't see much of it, and when you do, it's quick. So it doesn't take you out of the intensity of the moment. And for the most part, they use practical, and the practical is really solid in this film. Even when they expose it for longer periods of time, the practical effects look good. There's also a meta element to this film as well. You get a couple of characters who are pretty self-aware, and again, that's good dialogue from Zach Kroger. There's pretty good dialogue in this film. It's written well in general. I love the way the main character is written, and I love all of the conversational aspects of this film. There's a character later on that comes in that has some meta vibes to it. There's definitely some societal statements in this character where we kind of get some pieces of like a Frankenstein, where the monsters aren't necessarily always bad and the people aren't necessarily always good. That's one of the notes I made to my friends, was that I love in the early monster movies how the monster really was just kind of doing what they're there to do. They're kind of just doing what they're programmed to do and kind of trying to find humanity and find friendship, and the people are the things that make them bad, and you kind of get certain elements of that in this film, which I always like. But now we're going to the negatives. So I think I expected this to be either a little more straightforward or a little more kind of even-toned. And the second half of this film kind of subverts that, some ways in a positive, some ways in a negative. I think that there's this dramatic shift. So you have this first half of the movie, and all of a sudden it stops dead in its tracks, and it tones upbeat, and you get this upbeat music, and you get an introduction of a new character. And you're going, wait a minute, I just spent, 45 minutes being invested in this film. It's getting right to the good part. I want to see what's going to happen. And now there's this almost comedic, not slapsticky, but really just kind of upbeat, kind of in-your-face, like, look what we just did. It's a really stylized choice, and it's very unique. I don't see it done very often. But it kind of takes you out of the moment, and then you have to build a whole nother kind of universe outside of what's happening so that later on it can all connect. It happens again in this film as well, where in the third act of the film, we start over again and get another character that, of course, also ties in. So the universe is brought together one by one, but this movie almost reads like an anthology film. It's almost like you're getting different tales inside the same film, because you take a long journey, you get invested, you get right to the payoff, and then it cuts, starts over, and gets you to reinvest, which does eventually get you invested in all the characters. But it doesn't necessarily tell you all the ins and outs that you want to know, and it does kind of have a jarring shift when you're on the edge of your seat and you're jumping, you're getting ready for something big, and now all of a sudden you're starting from scratch. So it's a weird choice that kind of jumps in tone. And the backstory. The backstory does become clear. They do kind of explain what's happening, although you don't really get the origin of it. You're kind of dropped in the middle of it, which is fine. But I would have liked the origin, because there are a lot of layers here, and there are places to go, both in a sequel and in a prequel for this movie, which does speak to the interesting characters and does speak to the interesting story. But I wish we had tied up a few more loose ends here. I imagine we could be getting another Barbarian at some point in the future, which I'm totally cool with because I enjoyed this movie. But the backstory kind of leaves you a little bit wanting more. That they kind of tell you where we are, but again, we get dropped right in the middle of it, and we don't kind of get any beginning, and you don't really get finality. There is a concrete ending, but you don't really get the finality of that ending in this movie, which kind of brings me to the negative of the holes, the connecting of the holes. There are certain things that you kind of want to know how or why they happened that you really don't get to, and kind of that's a personal choice. Some viewers like to know less and kind of just see things as they happen and not be told everything. I like to kind of be told a little more when I invest in characters, so you don't really get a pat finish or a pat reasoning for some of this stuff, which takes me a little bit out of it. This film does run an hour and 43 minutes in total with credits, and I really enjoyed it overall. I like what we saw from this. This is not as complicated as you might think it's going to be, and it doesn't rely too much on the James Wan jump scares. I think this is going to be the kind of movie, if people like James Wan jump scare movies, there is some of that in this movie, but I feel like the jump scares all pay off. They're all natural. They all make sense. They're not cheap. I feel like this is the kind of movie that James Wan should be doing if I were the one to dictate what a James Wan film would be. If that makes any sense to you guys. So overall, I enjoyed this movie. You can kind of turn your brain off and just watch. There are some moments that shock you, but the moments that shock you are more so the changes in tone of the story over the things that happen in the story. But again, this leaves a lot of meat on the bone for prequels, sequels, and stuff like that. This is a pretty fun movie, and I've got it overall listed as a 7 out of 10. And I have this film in my lower end top 10 for the year. I've got it, I think, at number 9 right now. So it's not going to revolutionize anything. It's not going to change your world, but it is a fun, easy to follow, but does take some windy twists to get there, and a well-acted and well-shot film. So I think if you like good dialogue and good characters, but you don't overinvest in every aspect of their lives, I think you'll enjoy this overall. Again, I give it a 7 out of 10. I've got it at number 9 in my top 10 for the year. So if you guys saw it, please tell me in the comments below what you think. This is my first of 2 reviews now. I'm going to be posting this one immediately and also reviewing another movie that I saw this week, Smile. That is coming up probably within a few days of the time that I upload this. I'm recording it right now, and I'll be uploading it later. So if you guys want to see Smile, check that out. I've got a bunch of movie reviews from this year on my channel. But yeah, if you guys saw Barbarian, please like, share, and subscribe this video. Tell me in the comments what you thought of this movie, and then come back and watch the review for Smile directly after. So I will see you guys soon. Stay scared. Happy October.